A garage mechanic and a hidden heiress, love found in the simplest moments. The rain tapped softly against the windows of Café Sol, a small diner tucked away on a quiet street in Seville. The faint glow of yellow lights spilled through foggy glass panes, casting shadows that danced with the rhythm of the storm outside. Inside, the air was thick with the comforting aroma of freshly baked churros, roasted coffee, and sizzling jamon. Soft flamenco guitar music played from an old speaker in the corner, blending seamlessly with the low hum of conversation from a handful of late-night customers. At a corner booth sat Esteban, his grease-stained hands wrapped around a cracked ceramic mug of café con leche. His worn leather jacket hung over the back of the chair, damp from the relentless rain. The ache in his shoulders lingered after a long day fixing cars at the local garage, but it was a familiar kind of exhaustion, one he didn't mind. This place was his sanctuary. No one asked questions here, and everyone minded their own business. But tonight, something felt different. Across the room, Catalina sat by the window, her arms crossed tightly as she stared out into the rain. Her usual polished confidence was nowhere to be found. Instead, she wore a plain navy hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers, far removed from the designer labels she normally adorned. She had come here impulsively, desperate for a moment of peace after a grueling day filled with back-to-back meetings, endless expectations, and the suffocating weight of pretending to be someone she wasn't sure she even liked anymore. Tonight, she just wanted to disappear. Her meal, a bowl of creamy tomato soup and a side of warm bread, sat half-finished in front of her. For the first time in years, she felt normal. But as she reached for her bag to pay, her stomach dropped. Her wallet was gone. "Everything all right, senora?" The waiter, a young man with an impatient frown, approached. His voice was polite, but the edge of irritation was clear. Catalina's face flushed as she rifled through her coat pockets for the third time. She could feel the stares of the other diners pressing down on her, the discomfort prickling at her skin. I'm so sorry," she stammered, forcing a tight smile. "I must have forgotten my wallet. I can come back tomorrow and—" "We have a policy," the waiter interrupted, unimpressed. "Payment is due before leaving. No exceptions." Catalina swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. From his booth, Esteban watched the scene unfold. At first he thought it was just another awkward misunderstanding. But as the exchange continued, he noticed the tension in her face, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she searched her pockets. She wasn't trying to avoid paying, she was genuinely distressed. Without thinking, Esteban stood up. "Hey," his voice cut through the tension as he approached the counter. Catalina's head snapped toward him, her face pale with embarrassment. Esteban gave her a calm, reassuring nod before turning to the waiter. "I've got this," he said simply, pulling a few crumpled euros from his wallet. Catalina's eyes widened. "No, please, I can't let you." Esteban held up a hand, stopping her gently. "It's just a bowl of soup," he said softly. "Really, everyone has bad days. No need to make a big deal out of it." The waiter, clearly relieved, took the cash and walked off without another word. Catalina sat there, stunned. No one had ever done something like that for her before, at least not without expecting something in return. When she finally found her voice, it was softer than she intended. "You didn't have to do that. I could have figured it out." Esteban shrugged, offering a small, easy smile. "I know, but sometimes it's nice to let someone else help. Trust me, I've been there." A beat of silence passed between them. Catalina wanted to say more, to explain herself, but the vulnerability felt too raw. She wasn't ready to reveal who she really was, or the life she was running from tonight. And instead, she grabbed a napkin and scribbled something down. "Thank you," she said quietly, sliding the folded napkin across the table before rising. Esteban watched as she left, the bell above the door chiming softly behind her as the rain swallowed her figure into the night. He unfolded the napkin. "I owe you. Please let me make this right. Catalina." Beneath it was a phone number. Esteban stared at the note for a long moment, the edges of his lips curling into a soft, curious smile. He didn't know who she really was, and neither of them realized how that simple act of kindness was about to change their lives forever. Days turned into weeks, and Esteban and Catalina's meetings became a quiet constant in their lives. They would sit together at Café Sol, sharing coffee, laughter, and stories that grew more personal with each passing night. Esteban found himself looking forward to these moments, the way she listened without judgment, as if truly seeing him for who he was. For Catalina, these evenings were a rare escape. The simplicity of their conversations offered her a peace she hadn't felt in years. But as their bond deepened, so did the weight of her growing guilt. She wasn't lying, not technically, but she wasn't being truthful either. One rainy evening as they lingered over half-empty cups of café con leche, Esteban's words caught her off guard. "You know," he said thoughtfully, stirring his drink, "I've met a lot of people who think money fixes everything, but it doesn't. I've seen too many guys in fancy suits who forget what it's like to actually work hard." Catalina's stomach twisted. He didn't know. Not yet. But his words stung. Not because he was wrong, but because she was part of the world he clearly resented. Later that night, back in her penthouse apartment overlooking the glittering cityscape of Seville, Catalina stared out at the lights. Would Esteban still look at her the same way if he knew the truth? Would he see the woman in the diner? Or just the millionaire with the perfect life he assumed she had? She wasn't sure she wanted to find out. Not yet. The diner was quieter than usual that evening, the rain tapping gently against the windows in a soothing rhythm. Esteban sat at his usual booth, nursing a cup of coffee, and waiting for Catalina. Their meetings had become the highlight of his week. Simple conversations over coffee and churros, moments that felt genuine and real. But tonight, she was late. He checked his phone again. No messages, no missed calls. Just as he was about to give up and leave, he saw her outside the window. Catalina stood on the sidewalk, speaking softly to someone, a sharply dressed older man standing beside a sleek black Mercedes. It wasn't just any car. It was the kind of luxury vehicle you didn't see in this part of town often. Esteban watched as the driver opened the door for her. Catalina offered a polite nod, slipped inside, and the car pulled away, vanishing into the rain-slicked streets. Something felt wrong. Back at his small apartment later that night, Esteban couldn't shake the image of that Mercedes from his mind. "Don't be stupid," he muttered to himself, pacing the room. Maybe she was just catching a ride home. Maybe she had a friend helping her out. But curiosity gnawed at him. Finally, he opened his laptop and hesitated. "What are you doing?" he asked himself aloud. But the image of that car haunted him. He typed her name into the search bar. Catalina Sinclair. The results loaded almost instantly, and what he saw made his stomach twist. CEO of Sinclair Enterprises. Net worth. 450 million euros. Philanthropist. Business mogul. Wine? Article after article appeared, photos from galas and charity events, interviews in Forbes España and Business Insider. The woman he'd been meeting for coffee wasn't just in business consulting, she owned a global empire. The next day, Esteban didn't return her calls. Or the next. Catalina, confused and hurt, tried to give him space. She sensed something was wrong, but had no idea he had discovered her truth. It wasn't until the fourth evening, back at Café Sol, that Esteban finally showed up, unannounced. Catalina had just finished dinner alone, her untouched coffee growing cold, when the bell above the door chimed. She looked up, relief flooding her face, until she saw his expression. He looked different, cold, guarded. "Catalina," he said, his voice low but tight with emotion. "Esteban?" she breathed, standing quickly. "I've been trying to—" He cut her off, his tone sharp. "So you're not struggling at all, are you, Catalina?" Her heart sank. "What?" He dropped a folded magazine onto the table. It was open to a feature article with her face prominently displayed, the same face she had tried so hard to hide. Catalina Sinclair, the billionaire philanthropist. "Catalina," he said, his voice heavy with betrayal. "Explain this." Tears welled in her eyes as she reached for his hand. "Please, let me explain." He pulled back, his jaw clenched. "Explain what? That you lied? That you pretended to be someone you're not? Was this all a game to you?" "No," she cried, her voice desperate. "I never lied to you. I didn't tell you everything." "You told me you were working in business consulting," he interrupted, his voice rising. You let me sit there and pour my heart out about my struggles while you have everything. You're a millionaire, Catalina. Why hide it? Her voice cracked. Because I wanted you to see me, not my money. Every man I've ever met only cares about that. About my wealth, my name. I didn't want you to see that version of me. I wanted you to see who I really am. Esteban shook his head, stepping back. So what? You thought I'd treat you differently? That I'd use you for your money? Is that what you think of me? No, she pleaded, tears streaming down her face. I was scared. You'd see me the way everyone else does, Catalina said, her voice trembling as tears streamed down her face. I've spent so long being defined by my last name. I just wanted something real for once. And what we had, it was real, wasn't it? Esteban's eyes softened for a fraction of a second, but the hurt was still too raw. He shook his head, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know anymore. Silence hung thick between them, the weight of unspoken truths pressing down like a storm cloud. Catalina reached for him again, her voice breaking. Esteban, please. I care about you. I didn't mean to hurt you. He stared at her for a long moment, his fists clenched at his sides. Finally he spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. Maybe you didn't mean to, he said, pausing to steady himself, but you did. With that, he turned and walked out the door, leaving Catalina standing alone. The rain fell softly outside, but this time it felt colder than ever. The days blurred into a quiet, aching void for both Esteban and Catalina. It does. Esteban hadn't returned to Café Sol since their confrontation. The place that once felt warm and comforting now seemed hollow, a reminder of a connection he wasn't sure had ever been real. He kept his head down at the garage, working long shifts, trying to drown out the thoughts gnawing at him. But no matter how much oil he wiped from his hands, no matter how many engines he fixed, she lingered in his mind. Her laugh, the softness in her eyes when she listened to his stories, the way she made him feel like he mattered. But she was a billionaire, and he was just a mechanic who barely scraped by. At night, he lay awake in his small, cramped apartment, the silence louder than ever. Maybe she was right, he muttered to himself one evening, staring at the cracked ceiling. Maybe she didn't trust me because I'm not enough. He replayed their conversations in his mind, the raw vulnerability she had shown. Yet, the pain of being deceived lingered. Was it a lie, or was she scared? Meanwhile, Catalina sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, staring out at the glittering city below. The skyline she once admired now felt like a cage. The rain blurred against the glass, mirroring the ache in her chest. She had checked her phone 100 times, hoping for a message, a sign that Esteban might reach out, but there was nothing. And she was too proud, too scared, to be the first one to break the silence. For years, Catalina had learned to guard herself. Growing up in wealth had taught her that most people were drawn not to who she was, but what she had. The private school friendships that faded when her family stopped hosting galas, the men who courted her name more than her heart. She had built walls because they were safe, because trusting people meant risking hurt. But Esteban had made her believe in something different, and now she had lost him. Several days later, unable to bear the silence any longer, Catalina made a decision. She needed to show him how much he meant to her. Without her wealth, without the image, she needed him to know the truth. That afternoon, Catalina arrived unannounced at Esteban's garage. The space was dimly lit, the scent of motor oil heavy in the air. Tools were scattered across a worn workbench, and the overhead light flickered weakly. It wasn't glamorous. It was hard, honest work. And it was a reflection of who Esteban was. She spotted him hunched over a beat-up sedan, grease smudged on his hands, and his face tense with concentration. Her heart ached. This was the man who had shown her kindness when she was a stranger, who had seen her, listened to her, long before he knew who she was. And she had let her fear ruin it. Esteban noticed her before she could speak. He straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, his expression guarded. Catalina, he said quietly, his voice strained. She stepped closer but kept a respectful distance. I didn't come to argue, she began softly, her voice trembling. I came because I need you to know the truth. All of it. Esteban crossed his arms, trying to mask the emotions twisting inside him. I think I've heard enough. Catalina shook her head, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. No, you haven't. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter, placing it gently on the workbench between them. This explains everything. Please just read it. And if you still want me out of your life after this, I'll go. No questions, no expectations. For the first time, Esteban saw true vulnerability in her eyes. Not carefully measured words, not the poised, distant millionaire, just Catalina, the woman he had once trusted. He stared at the letter but didn't reach for it yet. Catalina's voice broke the silence. I didn't hide who I was because I thought you weren't good enough, Esteban. I was scared. Scared that if you knew the truth, you'd see me the way everyone else does. Like some headline. Not a person. Not me. Her voice cracked, and she looked away, blinking back tears. I wasn't trying to deceive you. I was trying to protect something rare. Something I thought we had. Esteban felt his throat tighten, but the words still felt heavy. And how was I supposed to trust you, Catalina? How was I supposed to believe you when you were living this double life? She nodded slowly, accepting his pain. I know, and I can't erase what I did. But I'm here telling you now. Without the walls, without the image. A beat of silence passed. I care about you, Esteban. I care about you so much, she whispered. She hesitated before adding, I'll leave you alone now, but please, read the letter. With that, she turned and left the garage, the sound of rain echoing faintly in the distance. That night, after closing up the garage, Esteban finally unfolded the letter. Esteban, I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant to deceive you. When you paid for my meal that night, it wasn't just kindness. It was the first time in a long time someone treated me like a person, not a name or a paycheck. Esteban folded the letter carefully, his heart pounding. For the first time, he saw not the woman on the magazine covers, but the woman who had once sat across from him, sharing stories over coffee. Maybe, just maybe, he had let his pride blind him to what truly mattered. It wasn't too late. The letter lingered in Esteban's hands long after he had finished reading it. The words seemed to echo, filling the quiet space of his small apartment. I care about your kindness, your strength, the way you look at life with hope. Catalina's words felt so raw, so vulnerable, so different from the image of the powerful billionaire he had painted in his mind. And suddenly he realized it was never about her money. It was him. He had let his own insecurities, his fear of not being enough, poison something real. He had pushed her away, not because she had lied, but because he had been too scared to believe someone like her could truly care about someone like him. And now, he was losing her. The next morning, Esteban woke with a clarity he hadn't felt in weeks. He couldn't let this end the way it had. He had to make things right. But how? The letter was honest, heartfelt, but she deserved more. She deserved to hear it. A few days later, Esteban stood outside an opulent glass skyscraper in downtown Seville, his heart hammering against his ribs. The towering building, the kind of place he had only seen in movies, was intimidating. But tonight wasn't about wealth. It was about her. Inside, the gala was already in full swing. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting shimmering light across the room. Guests mingled, sipping champagne and admiring the sleek modern decor. A live orchestra played softly, adding to the sophistication of the event. And there, in the center of it all, stood Catalina. She wore a deep emerald gown, effortlessly graceful, her hair in soft waves over her shoulders. Yet, there was something guarded about her tonight. The smile she wore felt practiced, polite, but not real, because he wasn't there. Esteban adjusted his tie, a borrowed one from his boss at the garage, slightly wrinkled, and stepped inside. The murmur of the crowd quieted slightly as he entered. His worn dress shoes didn't quite belong on the marble floors, and he could feel the weight of curious eyes on him. He didn't care. His focus was on Catalina. She hadn't noticed him yet. She was speaking with a group of influential figures, nodding at something one of the men was saying. Taking a steady breath, Esteban crossed the room. Catalina, he said, his voice cutting through the air. Her head turned, eyes widening in shock. Esteban? Her voice was barely a whisper. The entire group fell silent. Esteban stepped closer, ignoring the stares, the whispers. Nothing else mattered now. "I'm sorry for interrupting," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I need to say something to you." Catalina blinked, her lips parting, but no words came. Esteban took another breath, speaking loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "I was wrong, Catalina. I let my own fears get in the way. I told myself I wasn't good enough for you, that you deserved someone who could give you more." His voice trembled slightly, but he pressed on. But the truth is, I don't care about your money. I never did. I care about you. The person who sits with me over coffee and laughs at my terrible jokes. The one who showed me kindness when I had nothing to offer in return. The woman who taught me that love isn't about what you have, but who you are. Gasps echoed softly through the room. Tears welled in Catalina's eyes. Esteban took a step closer. "I was scared. Scared that someone like you, someone amazing, could care about someone like me. But I don't want to live with that fear anymore. I don't want to lose you, Catalina." Silence. For a heartbeat, the entire world seemed to pause. And then Catalina broke. A single tear slid down her cheek as she whispered, "You were never not enough, Esteban." The crowd melted away as she closed the distance between them, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Before either of them could say anything else, Catalina reached out, her hand trembling as it brushed against his. "You've always been enough," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't hide my wealth because I thought you weren't good enough. I hid it because I was terrified you'd leave when you found out. But you stayed when no one else would. That's why I fell for you." Esteban swallowed hard, his chest tight. "I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time in weeks, a genuine smile broke across Catalina's face, one that reached her eyes. "Neither am I," she whispered, as they stood there, surrounded by luxury, but feeling worlds away from it. Esteban realized something. Love wasn't about titles or bank accounts. It was about seeing someone for who they truly were and choosing to stay anyway. And for the first time in a long time, both Esteban and Catalina felt whole again. When Catalina reached him, her hands trembled as they cupped his face. "You never had to prove yourself," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You already were everything I wanted." And with that, she kissed him. Soft, tender, filled with every unspoken word they hadn't said. Applause erupted around them, echoing in the grand hall, but Esteban didn't hear it. All he felt was the warmth of her arms around him, the steady beat of her heart against his. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the wealth, not the headlines, not the differences between their worlds. Just them, two hearts choosing each other, finally. The scent of fresh paint and motor oil filled the air, mingling with the sound of cheerful laughter and the hum of conversation. Sunlight streamed through the large garage doors, casting warm light across the freshly polished floors of Whitmore Auto Repair. Today was the grand opening of Esteban's new garage, a space he had dreamed of for years. And now, it was finally real. Balloons swayed gently at the entrance. A handmade banner reading grand opening stretched across the door. Friends, neighbors, and local business owners had gathered to celebrate. The energy was electric, filled with genuine support and warmth. And standing quietly near the entrance, wearing a simple sundress with her hair cascading in soft curls, was Catalina. She wasn't here as a billionaire, not as a CEO, just as Esteban's partner. Her eyes scanned the crowd, watching Esteban move from person to person, shaking hands, sharing stories, thanking people for being there. There was a lightness to him now, a confidence she hadn't seen before. He had found himself again, and that filled her with more pride than any success she had ever experienced. After their emotional reconciliation at the gala, they had taken things slow. Catalina had offered emotional support, but made sure Esteban was the one driving his dream forward. She hadn't written him a check or made calls to fast-track his business permits. Instead, she had stood beside him, encouraged him, listened as he brainstormed ideas late into the night. And Esteban, he had poured his heart into this place. From designing the logo to hand-picking the tools and equipment, everything in the garage reflected his spirit. This wasn't just a business, it was proof that he could build something meaningful with his own hands. A hush fell over the crowd as Esteban stepped onto a small makeshift platform, a pair of oversized scissors in hand. He cleared his throat, visibly emotional as he scanned the faces before him. I'm not much of a public speaker, he began with a nervous chuckle, earning a few supportive cheers from the crowd. But I need to say something today because this moment, it means more to me than I can put into words. He glanced toward the garage, his voice steady but thick with emotion. This garage, it's not just a business to me. It's a symbol of everything I've fought for. For the longest time, I didn't believe I could do this. I told myself I wasn't good enough, that dreams like this were for other people. His eyes shifted, landing on Catalina. And then someone showed me I was wrong. Catalina felt her breath hitch. She didn't just help me dream, Esteban continued, his voice softening. She reminded me that love is about seeing someone for who they are, not what they have. She believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, and I wouldn't be standing here today without her. A ripple of soft awe echoed through the crowd. Esteban's voice lowered, gentler now. So, Catalina... He turned fully toward her, holding out his hand. She stepped forward without hesitation, her fingers intertwining with his. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not for the support or the encouragement, but for showing me that I was enough all along." The crowd burst into applause, the emotion raw and undeniable. Catalina wiped a tear from the corner of her eye, overwhelmed by his words. And when Esteban looked at her, holding out his hand, she stepped forward without hesitation. His arm wrapped around her waist as he leaned down, pressing a tender, heartfelt kiss to her lips. The crowd cheered louder, but for that brief moment, the world around them faded. It was just them. Two people who had fought through misunderstandings, insecurities, and fear, choosing each other completely. When they pulled apart, Catalina whispered, "You never had to prove yourself to me, Esteban. You were always enough." He smiled, resting his forehead against hers. "And so were you." The crowd had dispersed, the laughter and music fading into the soft hum of crickets. The garage lights were dim, but the open doors let in the soft hues of a sunset, painting the sky in golds and purples. Esteban and Catalina sat together on a wooden bench just outside the garage, their hands intertwined. No words were needed. They had both found what they had been searching for: peace, love, and the freedom to be exactly who they were. The sun dipped lower, and Esteban turned toward her, his voice soft. "What's next for us, Catalina?" She smiled, resting her head against his shoulder. "Whatever we want, together." And in that quiet moment, beneath the fading light of the day, they knew this was only the beginning of their forever. Esteban and Catalina's story reminds us that true love isn't measured by wealth or status. It's about believing in one another, seeing the beauty beyond imperfections, and choosing love despite fear. If this heartfelt story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and comment your favorite part below. And for more inspiring tales of love, resilience, and second chances, be sure to subscribe to Timelens Stories. Thank you for being part of our storytelling family. We'll see you next time for another unforgettable story that touches the heart.